Is youth football in Africa getting better or it is getting worse? Well, it might depend on where you're looking at it from. If you're in somewhere like Morocco, you'd say it's booming because they've won back-to-back youth football tournaments in Africa. If you're in Nigeria, where they last won a youth tournament in Africa back in 2015, it might feel like things are going on a downhill. Egypt and South Africa have both qualified to the U17 and U20 AFCON in recent times. So it looks like progress for them. Then you look at a country like Senegal, who won everything youth football, but in recent years, it looks like they are crashing big time. To understand what is really going on, I'll be speaking with someone who works directly with young players in Senegal. He trains silent every day. So his whole life is literally working with young players. And this is a video you would like to watch because we have so much to discuss and talk about youth football generally in Africa, the progress, and how we can really move forward as a continent together. But before we even get into that conversation, I mentioned about Morocco. So let's look at what Morocco have been doing as a case study. They are currently the champions at under 17 level, the current champions of Africa at under 23 level, and even at the under 20 AFCON, they are the favorites to win it currently. So what really changed for them? Well, in 2020, Morocco rebuilt their main national sports complex into a world-class training center, and it's called the Mohammed VI complex. And here is what they added when they did that renovation. They had 8 football pitches, which is 4 of them were natural, and then the others was hybrid and also artificial pitch. They had a high-tech sports medical facility, which literally had everything from psychology to physiotherapy, all inputted in their development structure for football. And this sports complex had literally everything from restaurants to medical facilities to pitches to even accommodation, all of them world-class standards. So they trained literally everything just there. And since 2020, the result has spoken for itself in terms of youth development structure in football with Morocco in perspective. So before 2020, they had never made the under-17 AFCON final. Never made the final. But then after the renovation in 2020, they made it to the final in 2023. And then they won the 2025 U17 AFCON. At under 20 levels, the last time they made it to the semis was 2005. That's before 2020. But then after they made the renovation in 2020, in 2025 now, they're in the semifinals and even favorites to win the 2025 U20 AFCON right now. Also at U23 level, they had never won anything at that level, never in their history. But then after the renovation, they won the last U23 AFCON, won by Morocco after the same renovation of their sports complex. And it's even having impact on women football there because the national women's team had qualified to lead the AFCON 2 times, in 1998 and in 2000. All of them, they went out in the group stage. But after they did that renovation, the women's team reached the final of the last AFCON. And going to the next AFCON, it looks like they might be the favorites to win it in the next AFCON. It's also even affected them at the World Cup, where they were qualified to the World Cup for the first time in terms of women's World Cup. First time. And they went out of the group stage, a feat that a lot of African countries have not been able to achieve. And I think a lot of these recent successes will have a direct correlation with the sports complex because over here you have the chance to train athletes and they get a chance to recover. They have the chance to get the best of medical in terms of care for sports facilities. They get to stay there. They get to also host other countries right there. So every international break, you see Morocco under 15 playing, you see Morocco under 17 playing, you see Morocco under 19 playing, you see Morocco under 21 playing, and they are playing against other countries. They are not playing low-profile friendly matches. They are playing competitive friendlies against other countries. So they are constantly testing their levels, getting the best of players, getting the best of telepathy. And the result is telling in competitions they've been playing in Africa that they are way above everyone right now. And it took a huge commitment from their governments to invest in sort of this approach to say, this is how we want to develop our football. This is how we want to develop our sports for them to agree in unison and grow this way. So this whole conversation, this was a foreknowledge for the conversation, but now let me actually get into the conversation itself. All right, so I have the man himself here, Coach Torrenson. He's quite experienced in African football because he's been on the continent for quite a few years, growing and nurturing talents in Senegal. But let me not introduce him here. He's here himself. So let me allow him to introduce himself. So welcome to the, is it podcast? Yeah, to the show podcast. Coach 2019. Give us a brief introduction about yourself, how you got into African football also, because I'm interested to know how a man from wherever you came from. I wanted to introduce yourself. So you of course, you tell us where you came from. Then you certainly got interest in African football, then in Senegal football also.
Well, first of all, thanks for the invitation. I've been following your content, and I love the way you present African football. It's always very thoroughly, and also always with a positive vibe. So I love your content. So I'm
Thanks.
happy to be here. It's my third year now in Dakar, and first time working in Africa. Came to work here because I know the president of the club. He is a former agent. I came here to scout back in 2006 when I was head coach in a Norwegian top league club, and went to look for players in the off season in my country, and ended up signing two players from this agent. And then he later on formed the club, and now 6 promotions later, we are in the top league. Oslo Football Academy was formed in 2012, and this season we debuted in the top league in Senegal.
Amazing. So it's been 3 years you have been in Senegal, but I want to know what has been your experience so far. 3 years is a lot of years, a lot of time. What has been the experience, especially in terms of football development, because that's the area you specialize in developing players in Oslo Football Academy. So what has been the experience in terms of development of talent and even infrastructure in African football also?
Well, first of all, we are a very small club. My primary work is the daily coaching of the professional first team. But at the same time, one of the objectives with bringing me here was, of course, to try to help the coaches in the youth department, and to help structure the whole sporting side of the club. And this is a big task, and it's actually two different jobs. So my main focus today is coaching the first team, but at the same time I watch all the under 15, under 17, under 19 games. So it's a lot of football daily, all the clock around every day.
That's perfect. But I want us to focus on football in Africa in general. I'm sure as you are here working in a football club in Senegal, you have to also stretch your wings wide to see how football works on the continent, and especially in youth football. Currently ongoing is the under 20 AFCON, where 4 countries are going to the semi-final and also going to the World Cup. The country you work in is Senegal, and I think you even had a player in the Senegal U20 team. You couldn't make it to the semis, but then there is one country who have really sort of impressed on the youth football stage, and I'm sure you've seen their progression. Morocco, from winning under 23 AFCON the last time, winning the under 17 also the last time, and they are also in the semis now. And in my intro, I spoke about the sort of facilities they have and how they give players the perfect and best sort of situation to develop and also grow. But how do you think the kind of infrastructure and also development structure in Morocco really affects the national team that they are chalking this amount of success? I mean, from your experience, is there any correlation between the two in terms of having a good infrastructure structure and then successes for the team on the field?
Oh, well, that's undebatable, for sure. And the correlation, I would assume, is big, and there is not coincidental. So, like you mentioned, Senegal was on that high for 2-3 years ago, and then of course you can say it's a bit coincidental that you're on top in both on the 17 and the 20 and the both the professional and the home senior side. So that can happen, and maybe partly because of luck, but it goes to show that, of course, Senegal is a country to be reckoned with in Africa. But then when you now see the progression of Morocco, also in the last World Cup, of course, it's not coincidental. But here, I sometimes in Senegal, sometimes feel that it's more, and I'm not happy to say this, but sometimes I feel it's more in spite of than because of, because I see so much potential that is still untapped here in Senegal. And the reason why I say it's in spite of is for instance, facilities. Training facilities and game facilities is way below what what Morocco and other countries have. And these two things, the quality and the quantity of pitches, that goes hand in hand, because the pitches that, or the stadiums that could have been good, they are being overused. You drive past after midnight, the floodlights is on, the artificial turf, and the first session starts at 7 o'clock in the morning, and the last one ends at 1 o'clock in night. So they are worn out in 2 to 3 years. This is like it's holes in the artificial grass because of the overuse. So then the elite doesn't have good stadiums to play on, and the masses don't have stadiums to train at, or pitches to train at all. It's on the beach or on the sand, and this, of course, this has developed players before, and will continue to do so, but in the modern game you need pitches, and the infrastructure and the facilities here are way below what other countries that you like to compare with.
I'm happy about one thing you mentioned about pitches and infrastructure and everything. And I think this is a conversation we need to have generally as Africans, that who really has the mandate of making this infrastructure, making these pitches, making these stadiums, because that is the basics of what we need to grow football on the continent, to get the players good pitches to train on, to develop in that system. And there is a school of thought, or there is a conversation that government has a big role to play in. There's also another conversation that federations, the football federations, have a big role to play in this. So, I mean, from your experience, and I also want to tap your experience also by working in Europe also, because you have a lot of experience in Europe. How do you really bridge this infrastructure gap in terms of federations and governments? How do you really sort of work together to make sure that this gap is bridged?
I come from Scandinavia, from Norway. I'm brought up in a socialist and democratic system, and to me, it's very obvious that this is also a governmental issue, and it's the same politicians that will be on the stands and applaud when the nation lift the cup. So I think it's obvious it's a governmental state issue and responsibility to work with the sporting organizations to ensure best possible facilities. Of course, compared to, you need roads and schools and hospitals, but it has to be there, because this is keeping the youth out of trouble if you can supply them with the possibilities to do sports. So for me, that is very obvious or very simple.
I think I was talking earlier on about the success of Morocco in recent times. Can these sorts of successes be achieved by other African countries?
Any shortcut, to be honest. We already talked about facilities. We need to talk about education, and then better coaching education, which will lead to better player education. And when I see, I have to be careful. I have to talk mostly then from a Senegalese perspective, because I
Yeah.
cannot come here and say I know everything. I'm still learning a lot about Africa and everything culturally also. But when I see the talent pool here, for me, it's I I see kids with the ball under the arm and by the foot, even playing barefoot or in sandals. I have to drive around the goalposts in the street outside my house. So football is so popular here in Senegal, and every kid plays football. It's a ball culture. They have technique. They have the ball from from a very young age, and there is no secret that a lot of Africans have speed and power that surpasses many other ethnicities. So for me, the talent pool is fantastic, and then of course, from there you need systems like Morocco to develop and to make sure that you don't lose talents on the way. Uh, I think also some African countries, Senegal included, needs to address the selection, the system of selection for national teams, and there is need for improvement, for objectivity in those cases also.
Perfectly said. But in your conversations, when you talk about the football culture in Senegal, I can tell you that when you go to Nigeria, it's a similar thing. You find kids moving all around playing football almost everywhere. When you go to Ghana, it's almost the same thing. When you go to Ivory Coast, it's the same thing. It's sort of a West African football thing where football is the language of everyone. Even me, when I was a kid, even though it was quite some time ago, when I was as little as 7, 8 years, you could find me writing the names of footballers behind my dress because that's our culture. That's how we grew up in. But um, if you take youth football in Africa, let's say in the early 2000s, you found a country like Nigeria dominated so much. You found a country like Ghana dominating so much during those times. When it came to the post-COVID era, the pre and post-COVID era, you found Senegal dominating so much, where they were at the finals of the U17, U20 multiple times. They went to the World Cup, did so well. Eventually, they won the U20 AFCON, won the U17 AFCON. But it seems there's a diminishing, there's sort of, they are diminishing in that value, these countries I mentioned. What could actually be wrong causing, I mean, in your estimation from maybe tapping your experience in Senegal and also sort of your experience in youth football in general, because that's an area where you've worked in extensively. What could really count in a country performing so all at a time, then suddenly they are going down, and another country is rising up as they are going down?
Yeah, it's hard to point at just like one particular thing and say this is the reason for either an increase in results or a downfall. But when I watched the last game now of the under-20s, when they got knocked out on penalties against Nigeria, I was, to be honest, I was really disappointed about that game and not particularly impressed by Nigeria either. I felt that I watched a game between two teams who were extremely afraid of losing. When I see the style of football played in that game, I think we have to be honest, and if we compare that to one of the top five nations in Europe, like if this, we will see now in Chile in the autumn where how we compare. But I'm afraid that if you compare today this match between Senegal and Nigeria with a match involving Spain, Italy, Germany, England, you would be a fair bit behind. But that is like my fresh impression, because I was disappointed about the game, and of course the fact that I'm saying we now with with Senegal getting knocked out on penalties. But that game was poor in every aspect. The fear of losing is so much bigger than the willingness to take risk to string together 5 passes. There is long ball, there is dual, second ball, focus on the set pieces. But it's like, for me, this kind of football was not appealing at all, and I was disappointed. But to be honest, not surprised, because when you see the preparation that the under-20s of Senegal had, they have been living together. I've been missing my player. You mentioned my player, and for me, one of the best players in this under-20 national team, Sheikh Tiam. I've been missing him now almost the whole season, because he's been living in the federation's camp, playing together, training together for months for this AFCON. And when you see them and they can't string together 4 passes, then I'm thinking, why the long preparation? I have to be honest, and I'm really disappointed from what I saw from that game.
But is it a matter of, that game was a game of the winner goes to the World Cup. So is it a matter of maybe we are allowing the sense of, I want to get to the World Cup, because at the World Cup, maybe the player gets more exposure and there is a possibility of them getting a better career path if they play at the World Cup. So I certainly want to get the World Cup. So that sort of intent, that will of trying to get to the World Cup is overshadowing the intent of trying to actually develop the players from playing football in a way that will support their progression. Is it something like that?
For sure. And that's why maybe my criticism will provoke someone, because you have to look at the other side. There is a huge price dangling over the heads of the players, and of course, mentally you can. It's tough. It's tough on you when you go out there, and there is also other things that is very interesting to discuss, but maybe also a little bit touchy theme, and that is, in Senegal, they brought in some of the players that had been sold abroad, and in that sense, achieved their dream of getting a professional contract in Europe. Then they bring them in, let them play, and the team underperforms. And then the media here says that, well, throw out all the foreign-based players and then get in the ones that are prepared to fight, because their future depends on it. And, so it's like saying these players were one of us just 3 months ago, but then suddenly he got the chance to go to Italy, and now he's one of them. And this creates also tensions within a group, So not easy for the ones arriving. And of course, they have not been part of this extremely long preparation that I told you about. They've arrived for the finals.
Well, you mentioned earlier on about how you are managing Oslo Football Academy. Also has a lot of youth setup where you sort of have oversight over all of them. But how does an academy like this, and I'm sure in Senegal there are lots of academies, just like how it is in Nigeria. I mentioned it is in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Ivory Coast, in Mali, to sort of tap into the talent pool in West Africa. But how well can these academies really sort of collaborate with national teams to ensure that, in as much as you are developing the players, they're also in tune or in line to a national idea of growing a football system in a way that suits how the academies are also growing their players? How is a collaboration like that?
For me, I believe that is the way forward. There has to be cooperation, there has to be transparency, and there has to be formed forums where club and federation, local federation and the main federation have open lines and ways to communicate about players and make selection a transparent process that is the end product of a plan of how we work, how we do in our culture, in our country to develop talent. And I follow this with interest now because Senegal is exactly 10 years behind my country, and I was part of this when we started in Norway. When the federation came in and gave clear direction for the clubs on how to run their academies. So the federation was actually putting down the demands for how your academy would be categorized. If you have so and so many coaches, if you have a clear sporting curriculum, if you have so and so many, if you have a coach educator, you have a sporting director, you have so and so many pitches, everything could be categorized, and then the final came out with the sum. Okay, so this sum makes you a category 3 or a 3-star academy. And then if you are a 3-star academy, you receive this amount of money from the federation to support your system. If you are a 2-star academy, because you are missing this and this, you get a little bit less money, but all is transparent, everybody knows. So the clubs are striving to develop their academies to reach the next level of categorization. And now, exactly this year, this is starting now in Senegal, because, and this is probably the same all over Africa, we have too many clubs or organizations, let's call them that, calling themselves a football academy. But it can be one man with a bag of shirts and he say, come on kids, I have a football academy, come and play for me. And that is not a football academy. And I'm not saying it's not a good thing, it's a good thing he organizes activity for kids, but there has to be some demands on how or how you should be able to call yourself a football academy. So this Senegal now is starting to categorize the academies, and in our case, the ones who will get the top category will be the likes of Generation Foot, of Diambars, Dakar Sacré-Cœur, academies that have produced world-class players for decades now. And then the rest of us will need to strive to come after and reach a classification based on what we can offer.
All right, so let's talk about, I think, a topic that I think we don't really address that much as a continent here. So when you watch, let's say, in Spain under 21 side play, or when you watch England under 21 side play, you see a lot of talented players, a lot of their best under 21 players in this setup. But it is not mostly the same in Africa here. Let me give you an example. In Senegal, for instance, they just ended under 20. And when they were at under 17, the captain of the team was Amara Diouf. At under 20, he's not around because he's in Europe trying to chase his career. Same in Mali. They had, I think, Sekou, who is now with Manchester United. He's not around. They had Diarra, who is now with Barcelona, not around. I think even there was a player of yours who was at the last under 20 World Cup, Mamon Diaye, who is now in Europe. So maybe he could have been with this team, this under 20, but he was not around too because he's in Europe. How does players really exporting to Europe hurt the progression of the national team? Because you would ordinarily expect players to play from U17, U19, U21, then to national team. But then you have, in a way, where players play U17, then they get to Europe. You don't hear of them again until they get to the top, then they are coming back to the national team. So there is not really that progression from different age levels to get to the national team. It's a matter of you play U17, you get to Europe, then years later, you come back to the national team. How does it really hurt the progression of a country with a system like this?
That's a complex question, and I think there are different angles to address it. On one hand, you can say that, okay, we have to acknowledge that there is a difference between the continents, between Africa and Europe, and that when a player has the chance to go to Europe, this has, of course, economical consequences for him, which is huge. And maybe you could say that, okay, let's leave him there, even if he goes to the under 20 or under 23 in that club, if it's a top club with a good system. Let's leave him there for development for the next 2-3 years and see what happens to him. But that means maybe we don't bring him back for the under 21 or 23, or he's like, we could look at him as, okay, he has gotten his chance. Let's bring another player on the under 20s, which is still locally based, and let him be in that shop window that the AFCON or the national team is, because that is where you get scouted. I can say with experience from Oslo, we play in the top league, but our players get scouted when they represent Senegal. That's a fact. So that is one way of looking at it, that he has achieved the possibility of going to Europe. So let's give those spots to the ones who still haven't been exposed to the scouts and to the possibility, or which then would demand a lot more work. We need to travel to watch them in their clubs in Europe, and we need to make sure that they are ready and in form and prepared to come to the playoffs like the under 20 now. So it's a big question, and it's about also economy and prioritization from the federation to go there and to study them, because it's not enough that he achieved the possibility to go to a European club. You need to know what he's actually doing there, what kind of level he's playing, and so on.
All right, I think rightfully, as you were saying, so if the focus is on the talent here in Africa, I think you mentioned earlier on about how some players of a player of yours, Sheikh was in the national team for months, but then they didn't really get to play high-profile friendly games to really assess how well they are progressing as a team until probably they got to play maybe the WAFU qualifiers. So. And as I mentioned, CAF already has instituted this WAFU qualified, but then you play this competition every 2 years. Every 2 years. So if you're a country who you don't get to play at the AFCON itself, then a 20 AFCON and a 17 AFCON, you only get to test your national team every 2 years. Do you think there can be a new approach, something different that can be done by the football body on African football, that's CAF, to sort of help improve local football holistically as a continent?
Yeah, there is an example now coming up. There will be under 19 national team players born in 2007, 2008, who is now traveling to Switzerland in the end of the month. We have two players in the pre-selection for this tournament. They will go to Switzerland on the 28th of May to play against, they are invited by UEFA and to play against European national teams. And that is a great possibility for the players who get that chance, because it's different, a little bit different style of football to come up against. And I guess for the UEFA nations that will take part, it will probably be their first chance to play against an African national team. So that's a benefit for both sides, and a preparation for the World Cup when you get together and meet all the different football cultures of the world. But this is systems that benefit only very few, so it will be important for the ones who get the chance, but we are talking only a group of 25 players per time they travel.
But
not influential.
is a system like this really enough? Because how many times will UEFA invite you for a friendly? I mean, it's going to happen maybe once a year or maybe 2 times a year for a particular age group, maybe under 19. I think it was 2 times a year. But so if you go out to a competition and play maybe 3, 4, 5 games at that tournament, that's all for those age group level of players. You don't really get to compete at amongst yourselves at that high level. So I was thinking around whether there can be different sort of policies introduced to help these players compete actively at that level. Because if you look at Morocco, the Morocco example, every international break, they are playing. Morocco, you see Morocco under 15 playing every international break against another country, not against maybe club teams in Morocco. They are playing against another country. They've invited another country to play against them. So every international break, they are testing their abilities, testing how good they are, testing their progression, getting to know who are the better players, building synergy and also telepathy amongst themselves. So can there be any sort of policies to be implemented on a continental level to sort of help also these players aside the competitions to play every 2 years, and maybe the one time you get invitations from UEFA or maybe another rich country for a friendly match?
I again, this is also a bit of politics, but
Yeah.
what if Africa started to unite in a bigger scale and make it a little bit easier to travel between African countries, and both from a visa perspective and the flight tickets, and it should be possible to play a lot more against amongst ourselves in Africa. Let's make a proposal. Let's propose to the federation to stop traveling with the executive people on the first class and spend this money on coach class for players instead. I think that probably that maybe would balance each other out.
Yeah, I get you. I get you very well. I mean, it's quite a topic that maybe we might have to touch at a point in time. That specific video you mentioned, but I mean, you've experienced Africa for about 3 years. Also experienced other parts of the world. What would be your message to, let's say, African federations in terms of football development on the continent?
Again, very big question, but let's try to be like to single out one thing, and then I think something that would improve the possibility of learning and developing amongst kids would be that the coaches would lessen the demand for result all the time. I see a lot of result orientation amongst the small ones, which should not be necessary, and I'm thinking that this is like hindering the development of young players when the only thing that matters is the result, and this leads to even the smaller kids practicing time wasting and simulation. They watch, of course, the grown-ups, and when they see this on the top, they keep they do it. They adapt very fast, and I see coaches down in the age group from like under 15 and even younger, so much focus on the result, and that leads to like a minimalistic approach to the game. And for me, I think then we are limited the artist, the player who can play freely and can show us his tricks. We need also to not to forget that football is meant to be pleasing. It meant to be entertainment. And when we are talking about some of the rough diamonds that we have here in Africa, these are the players that people love to watch. And if the coach is demanding result in the under 13 and people get afraid and tense because the fear of losing, then I'm thinking we might do injustice to the possibility of developing that diamond.
All right, let's please better facilities and better education. Thank you very much, Coach Torrenson, for your thoughts and also your input on African football. Really appreciate it.